Husband divorced his infertile wife after years of trying for a child, unaware of her $50 million inheritance. He divorced her after years of sacrifice, calling her barren and useless. And as if the papers weren't cruel enough, he didn't walk out alone. He left her for Sophia, the family nurse who once wiped her tears in secret, the very woman she trusted to care for her during her darkest days. "You'll never give me children, Grace. Sophia will give me the family you failed to. Sign the papers. I'm done with you." Those were the cutting words David spat as Sophia stood smirking by his side. Instead of love, he gave her humiliation. Instead of loyalty, he handed her over to betrayal. He thought leaving with Sophia meant victory. But what he never imagined was that the wife he scorned carried a hidden legacy, of $50 million. A power that would not only rebuild her life, but also crush the pride he built with lies. Sometimes the woman you abandon for another becomes the very name your mistress learns to fear. Sometimes the wife you humiliate becomes the voice you can never silence. This is not just another story of betrayal. This is the cry of a wife mocked, the shame of being replaced, and the triumph of a woman who rose with unstoppable strength. Her journey is alive again through these words. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. Before we continue, I ask you from my heart, don't just watch and pass by. If you scroll without subscribing, it's like letting her betrayal fade without justice. But when you click that button, you stand with her story, with every woman betrayed. And in the comments, let us know where you're watching from, so she knows she's not alone. Grace Williams slammed her hand against the bathroom counter, biting back a scream as yet another pregnancy test showed a single, lonely line. The silence in the room felt louder than thunder. She had been through this 100 times. Injections, pills, endless hospital visits. Tonight was no different. Her knees buckled, and tears ran down her face like rain that refused to stop. From the doorway, David Williams watched, arms crossed, his jaw tight. Once he would have rushed to her side, pulled her into his chest, whispered hope into her ear. But now his voice was sharp. Grace, how long are we going to keep doing this? How many more years do you want me to waste? Grace turned, eyes red, hands trembling. David, I'm trying. I've sold my jewelry, my mother's earrings, even my wedding bracelet, all to pay for the treatments. Can't you see? I'm not giving up. But her words fell flat. David's silence was not compassion anymore. It was ice. Downstairs, Helen Williams, David's mother, sat stiffly on the couch, her words like knives whenever Grace walked into the room. A barren woman brings no blessing. My son deserves children, Grace. Do you hear me? Children. You're wasting his years. Grace swallowed the insult as she always did, forcing a smile and hiding the cracks in her heart. But behind her eyes was a storm of shame. Dr. Richard Benson, the family doctor, had warned David weeks before. David, infertility is not just the woman's burden. Tests show you both carry complications. Don't blame Grace. But David had laughed bitterly. Doctor, don't cover for her. She's the problem. The neighbors added fuel to the fire. Ruth Miller, the woman next door, whispered at the market stalls. Have you heard? Grace has been married for 8 years and no child. What kind of curse is that? Others giggled, shaking their heads as if Grace's pain was entertainment. At night, Grace lay awake, staring at the ceiling, while David turned his back to her. Memories of their early love haunted her. Nights of laughter, whispered promises, plans for children who would never come. She wondered if the man beside her was even the same man she married, and yet in her heart, she clung to hope. She believed love could survive this storm. She believed David's heart could soften again. She believed that one day her womb might carry the child they longed for. But beneath her hope was a growing fear, a fear that David was slipping away, that Helen's words were poisoning his heart, and that whispers outside were becoming louder than the vows they once spoke. As Grace closed her eyes, praying for strength, she didn't notice David slipping out of bed, his phone glowing in the dark. He typed a message, his face lit with a strange calm. A name flashed on the screen. Sophia Turner, the nurse who worked at the family clinic. And that was the beginning of cracks that would soon shatter their world. What started as hidden tension would soon spill into the open, tearing their marriage apart piece by piece. David slammed the front door so hard the glass rattled in its frame. Grace, startled in the kitchen, nearly dropped the pot of soup she had been stirring. He stormed in, his tie loosened, his face twisted with rage. "I'm sick of this life, Grace." His voice cracked like a whip. 8 years. 8 wasted years and nothing to show for it. Not a son, not a daughter, nothing. The words pierced Grace's chest like arrows. She tried to steady her voice. "David, please, don't speak like that. We're in this together. I'm not giving up." But he cut her off with a sneer. "You're not giving up? You should have given up on me years ago. I'm tired of coming home to silence. I'm tired of pretending this house isn't cursed." Grace's hands trembled, the ladle slipping into the soup. She wanted to scream back, to fight for her place, but her heart collapsed under the weight of his bitterness. Later that evening, David sat on the porch steps, shoulders heavy. His phone buzzed with a message. It was Sophia Turner, the family nurse. Sophia was 28, gentle-faced, always ready with soft words. She had been present during Grace's fertility treatments, holding her hand when injections brought tears. To Grace, she was comfort. But to David, she was becoming something more. "David, are you okay? You look tired at the clinic today," Sophia's message read. Her concern slid into his heart like warm honey. He typed back quickly. "I just feel trapped. I don't know how much longer I can live like this." Sophia's replies came swiftly. "You deserve happiness. You deserve a family. Don't let anyone steal that from you." David's lips curved into a smile, the kind Grace hadn't seen in months. He didn't notice how dangerous those words really were. Meanwhile, across town, Sophia sat with Lydia Scott, her closest friend. Lydia was bold, greedy, and sharp-tongued, always pushing Sophia toward wealth and status. "You'd be a fool not to take this chance," Lydia said, sipping her wine. "David's rich. He's desperate for a family. And you? You can give him the comfort his barren wife never could. Don't waste time being a nurse when you could be a wife." Sophia's eyes flickered with doubt. "But Grace trusts me. I've been in her home. She calls me a sister." Lydia laughed coldly. "Sister? Please, she's nothing but a stepping stone. Don't be soft. This is your chance to rise." Sophia's fingers tightened on her glass. The thought of wealth, of being admired as the woman who gave David what Grace could not, settled in her chest like fire. Back at the Williams home, Grace sat silently on the bed, staring at her wedding photo. David lay beside her, his back turned. The distance between them felt like a canyon no bridge could cross. She whispered into the dark, "God, please don't let me lose him." But David wasn't listening. His phone lit up again with Sophia's name, and his heart raced in ways it hadn't in years. And as Grace turned her face into the pillow, muffling her sobs, the seeds of betrayal were already being watered. Soon those cracks in private would erupt in public, and the whole world would see their marriage breaking apart. The restaurant fell silent as David Williams slammed his fist against the table, making the cutlery rattle. Every head turned. Grace froze, her spoon halfway to her lips, her cheeks burning as David's voice cut through the evening air. "You'll never give me children, Grace," he roared. 8 years, 8 years of waiting, and nothing. You've ruined my life." Gasps echoed across the room. A waiter dropped a tray of glasses. Grace's hands shook, the soup spilling back into her bowl. She wanted to disappear, to crawl into the floor and vanish. Helen Williams, her mother-in-law, leaned back smugly in her chair, her words dripping with venom. "He speaks the truth, Grace. My son deserves a family. A woman who cannot give life brings shame. You should free him before it's too late." The whispers grew louder among the diners. Ruth Miller, their neighbor, sat at the next table with her friends. She smirked, whispering loud enough for Grace to hear. "Poor thing. 8 years married and not a single child. What kind of wife is that?" Her friends chuckled, the sound like daggers piercing Grace's soul. Grace's vision blurred with tears. She reached for David's hand, desperate, trembling. "David, please. Not here. Don't humiliate me in front of everyone. We can talk at home." But David pulled his hand away as if her touch burned him. His face twisted with cruel satisfaction. Why hide it, Grace? Everyone already knows. You're barren. You're useless. You're nothing. A flashbulb burst from the corner. A young woman stood there with a camera, notebook in hand. Naomi Brooks, an ambitious journalist from the city paper, smelled scandal like wolves smell blood. She scribbled furiously, her eyes gleaming. The very next morning, her article appeared in bold letters. Barren wife humiliated by husband in public outburst. It spread like wildfire. In the marketplace, women shook their heads in pity. Men whispered about David's strength to speak out. Ruth Miller waved the paper with glee, telling anyone who would listen, "I told you that marriage was cursed." At home, Grace sat at the edge of her bed. The newspaper crumpled in her lap. Her hands trembled as she read the words over and over. Each line cut her deeper than the last. Her reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger, eyes swollen from weeping, lips pale, spirit crushed. She had given her all to love this man. She had sacrificed jewelry, comfort, health, and dignity to save their dream of children. Yet here she was, branded barren, mocked in the streets, abandoned in public. She whispered into the silence, "God, why am I being punished? Am I not enough as I am?" Downstairs, David poured himself a drink, his jaw tight. Sophia's name glowed on his phone screen. She had read the article too, and her message was clear. "Don't worry. I'll give you the family you deserve." David's lips curled into a cruel smile, and as Grace lay curled on her bed, clutching the shredded article to her chest, the storm of betrayal had only just begun. Very soon, David would no longer hide Sophia. The betrayal was about to step out into the open for the whole world to see. The ballroom erupted in applause as David Williams strode in, his arm wrapped proudly around Sophia Turner. The chandeliers glistened above, but for Grace it was as if the light had died. She stood frozen near the entrance, the glass in her hand trembling as she watched her husband, the man who once promised her forever, kiss Sophia's hand for all to see. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Ruth Miller, their sharp-tongued neighbor, gasped with exaggerated delight. "Look at that! He doesn't even hide it anymore. Poor Grace, replaced by her own nurse." Her words traveled fast, echoing like poison across the room. Grace's knees buckled, her heart pounding. She clutched the table to keep herself from falling. Every eye seemed fixed on her, not in sympathy, but in mockery. Patrick Cole, David's longtime business partner, slapped him on the back with a laugh. "Now that's a real man, standing with a woman who can give him what he needs. No more wasting time." David grinned, lifting his glass high. "To new beginnings," he declared. Sophia leaned against him, her smile coy, her eyes glinting with victory. At the edge of the crowd, Naomi Brooks, the ambitious journalist, scribbled furiously in her notebook. Scandals sold papers, and this story was gold. She had already dragged Grace's name through headlines once, and now the betrayal would be her next weapon. The flash of her camera lit the room, capturing Grace's broken expression against David's arrogant smile. Grace's chest heaved, each breath like knives. She wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, to ask how the nurse she trusted with her tears now stood wearing her husband's affection. But her voice caught in her throat, strangled by shame. She slipped out of the ballroom quietly, the laughter of the crowd following her like a haunting chorus. Outside in the cold night, she leaned against the wall, her hands shaking, tears spilling freely. Her mind replayed every sacrifice she had made, every piece of jewelry sold, every night spent praying, every moment she carried the weight of their infertility alone. Now she realized David had never carried it with her. He had only been waiting for someone to blame, and Sophia had been waiting to take her place. At home, Miriam James, Grace's quiet caregiver, found her sitting on the floor, still in her gown, her hair undone, her eyes hollow. Miriam knelt beside her, placing a warm hand on her shoulder. "Don't let their laughter destroy you, Grace. The truth has a way of turning tables." But Grace only shook her head, whispering, "It's over, Miriam. My marriage, my dignity, everything is gone." Back at the ballroom, David and Sophia danced, their movements smooth and deliberate. Patrick raised his glass again. "Soon enough, David, you'll be rid of her. Divorce will seal it all." Naomi smirked, snapping another photo. "And the papers will eat it up." David laughed, holding Sophia close. Let them talk. Tomorrow the world will know she's finished. Grace thought the night was her deepest shame, but the worst was yet to come. The day divorce would strip her name in front of the law and the world. The courtroom doors slammed shut, echoing like a final bell. Grace Williams sat trembling at the defendant's table, her fingers clutched tightly around the edge of her chair. Her heart pounded like a drum. Across from her, David Williams leaned back with smug confidence, Sophia Turner at his side. Her lips curled into a victorious smile. Judge Harrison, stern and gray-haired, adjusted his glasses and spoke firmly. This court is now in session for the case of Williams versus Williams. We are here to determine the petition for divorce filed by Mr. David Williams. Before Grace could catch her breath, David stood abruptly, slamming a stack of papers onto the table. The sound cracked through the air like thunder. He sneered down at her. Sign them, Grace. Right here. Right now. End this farce of a marriage. Gasps rippled through the small crowd seated behind them. Ruth Miller, the ever-curious neighbor, leaned forward with glee, whispering, It's happening. She's finished. Helen Williams, David's mother, raised her chin proudly, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. My son deserves freedom from this curse. Today he will finally be free. Grace's lips parted, but no words came. Tears welled in her eyes as she stared at the divorce papers shoved before her. Her hands shook so violently she could barely steady the pen. Memories flooded her mind. Years of sacrifice, nights of prayer, mornings of silent tears. She had sold everything for this marriage, and now it was being shredded like paper. Sophia leaned close to David, her perfume heavy in the air. Her whisper was loud enough for Grace to hear. Once this is done, we can finally start fresh. With me, you'll have the family you deserve. Grace's heart cracked at those words. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest, whispering, God, give me strength. Judge Harrison cleared his throat. Mrs. Williams, do you wish to contest this divorce? Every eye in the room turned to her. For a moment, Grace wanted to fight. She wanted to shout that it wasn't her fault, that she wasn't barren alone, that love was supposed to endure storms. But the weight of shame, the sharp eyes of the community, and the cruel smirk on David's face drowned her courage. With a broken voice, she whispered, No, Your Honor. Judge Harrison nodded solemnly. Then the divorce is granted. He struck the gavel, the sharp bang echoing like a hammer driving a nail into her chest. David smirked, yanking the signed papers away and waving them in the air like a trophy. Sophia clapped softly, her eyes glittering with triumph. Helen beamed, her hands clasped together as if celebrating a victory she had long prayed for. Grace rose slowly, her legs weak, her dignity in tatters. She walked out of the courtroom in silence, the whispers and laughter of the crowd following her like chains. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though the ground itself wanted to swallow her whole. Outside the court, she collapsed on the steps, Miriam rushing to steady her, Evelyn Carter close behind with gentle hands. Evelyn's voice trembled with compassion. Grace, don't let this end you. Sometimes what breaks us is what remakes us. Grace buried her face in her hands, unable to answer. In that moment, she believed her life was over. What Grace didn't know was that the darkest night of her soul would soon be followed by a flicker of hope. A letter that would change everything. The rain poured heavily that night, hammering against the windows of Grace's lonely home. Inside, she collapsed on the floor of her bedroom, her sobs louder than the storm outside. Her wedding gown, once carefully preserved, lay crumpled in the corner, stained by tears and dust. She clutched the divorce papers to her chest, shaking violently as though the words themselves were knives cutting into her soul. Why, God? Why me? She cried out, her voice raw. Wasn't my love enough? Wasn't my sacrifice enough? The walls gave no answer, only silence, heavy, suffocating, endless. The door creaked open, and Miriam James, her longtime caregiver, stepped in quietly. She was a woman in her 50s, gentle-eyed, with calloused hands that spoke of years of humble work. She knelt beside Grace, pulling her into a firm embrace. Hush now, my child. Don't let their cruelty destroy you. Tears may water pain, but they also water strength. Grace's body went limp in Miriam's arms, her sobs echoing into the older woman's chest. But even Miriam's warmth couldn't melt the ice lodged deep in her soul. Moments later, Evelyn Carter, Grace's trusted law assistant, arrived. Younger, sharp-eyed, and fiercely loyal, Evelyn knelt to gather the scattered documents on the floor. "Grace, I'll keep these safe. Don't let David's cruelty define your future. He thinks he's ended you, but he hasn't." Grace shook her head, her voice breaking. "He has, Evelyn. I have nothing left. No husband, no children, no dignity. What am I now but a shadow?" Evelyn reached out, gripping her hand tightly. "You are more than his rejection. One day you'll see it." But not everyone came with comfort. Later that evening, the door swung open, and Peter Johnson, Grace's uncle, stomped in. His eyes glistened with greed, his lips twisted with disdain. "Grace, I heard the news. David is free now, and you?" He scoffed. "You're nothing but a burden. At least he has Sophia. She can give him what you never could." Grace's stomach clenched, but Peter wasn't done. He leaned closer, his voice low and bitter. "You should have signed everything over to him. Why cling to scraps when you failed as a wife? Don't expect me to defend you." Evelyn stepped forward, her voice sharp as steel. "That's enough, Peter. Leave her alone. You came here for money, not family, and you'll get nothing." Peter sneered, slamming the door on his way out. Grace curled into herself again, trembling. It seemed betrayal was not just her husband's choice, but the world's verdict against her. Hours later, she sat by the window, the rain soaking her hair as she stared into the night sky. Her reflection in the glass looked like a stranger. A woman stripped bare of hope, her heart cracked wide open. Her whisper was almost too faint to hear. "Maybe my life really is over." But far away, hidden in the quiet of a lawyer's office, an envelope with Grace's name waited. A letter sealed years ago by her estranged Uncle Jonathan Reed. The key to a fortune that would change her life forever. Out of this night of despair, a flicker of hope was about to rise, in the form of a letter she never expected to read. The pounding on the door jolted Grace from a restless sleep. She stumbled to her feet, eyes swollen from tears, as Miriam hurried to answer. A tall woman in a gray suit stepped inside, rain dripping from her umbrella. Her presence carried authority, her gaze calm yet firm. "I am Margaret Walker," she introduced herself, her voice clear and steady. "Attorney at law. I come bearing a letter for Grace Williams, from the estate of her late uncle, Jonathan Reed." Grace froze. Jonathan Reed? She hadn't spoken to him in over a decade. He had been a wealthy but distant man, estranged after a family dispute. Why would he send her anything? Margaret placed a sealed envelope into Grace's trembling hands. "It was his dying wish that you receive this at the appointed time, and that no one else know of it until you are ready." Grace's fingers shook as she tore it open. The letter inside was written in Jonathan's strong hand, though time had faded the ink. "To my niece Grace, life will test you. People will abandon you, but you must not break. If you are reading this, it means the storm has already come. Do not despair. I leave you an inheritance of $50 million with one condition. Use it not just for yourself, but to lift others who walk the same path of sorrow. From your pain, let others find hope. Jonathan Reed." Grace's breath caught, her knees giving way as she collapsed into the chair. 50 million? The words barely escaped her lips. For so long she had been mocked as barren, humiliated as worthless. Now in her hands was proof that her story was not over. Evelyn stepped closer, her face glowing with relief. "Grace, this changes everything. You don't have to live in shame anymore. You have power now. Power David knows nothing about." But Margaret raised a cautious finger. "This must stay private. If David, Sophia, or even your Uncle Peter discover this, they will drain it like wolves. Use wisdom. Build quietly. Rise carefully. Let no one see your hand until the right time." Grace clutched the letter to her chest, tears spilling anew. But these tears were different. Not of despair, but of sudden, fragile hope. "For the first time, I feel like I have a future." Miriam knelt beside her, pressing her hands warmly. Your uncle saw in you what others refused to. He saw strength. Don't waste this second chance. Grace nodded slowly, her voice trembling yet firm. I won't. I'll honor him. I'll rise again. And I'll help others like me. For the first time in months, her heart flickered with light. Yet even as hope stirred, a shadow of caution lingered. Outside, Peter lingered near the window, his eyes narrowing as he spotted Margaret leaving. His greed was not finished. With hope in her hands, Grace would soon begin rebuilding, but every step forward would risk exposing her secret, and the world was waiting to tear it from her. The morning sun burst through the curtains, flooding Grace's room with light. For the first time in months, she did not hide from it. She rose from her bed with fierce resolve, her hands clutching Jonathan Reed's letter. No more tears, she whispered to herself. Today, I begin again. In the kitchen, Miriam nearly dropped a plate when Grace walked in with steady steps. Gone was the broken woman who had sobbed herself to sleep. Miriam's eyes glistened with joy. Child, look at you. There's fire in your eyes again. Grace smiled faintly. Uncle Jonathan believed in me. I won't waste his gift. If the world calls me barren, then I will turn my barrenness into blessing. I will build a foundation for women like me, for every wife who was mocked, every mother who was denied. Miriam clasped her hands together, whispering a prayer of thanks. That afternoon, Grace met with Dr. Richard Benson, the family doctor who had always defended her. He looked at her with surprise as she entered his office, no longer hunched and broken, but upright and radiant. Grace, he said warmly, you look different. She nodded. Because I've decided I can't keep living as a victim. Doctor, you told me once that infertility is not a woman's fault alone. You were right. And I want to use my voice to remind other women of that truth. Dr. Benson's eyes softened. The world has been cruel to you, Grace, but if anyone can turn pain into hope, it's you. I'll help however I can. Medically, practically, whatever you need. From there, Grace moved quietly, carefully. With Evelyn Carter by her side, she began securing properties under her name, investing funds discreetly, and drawing blueprints for a center that would one day become a beacon of hope. Evelyn was meticulous, shielding every document with ironclad protection. Secrecy is your shield, she warned. David must never know what you have. Not yet, Grace agreed, her resolve sharpening with each passing day. She spent her mornings planning, her afternoons meeting quietly with trusted allies, and her evenings journaling her vision, a place of healing, education, and dignity for women discarded by society. Still, nights were not free from ghosts. At times she wept quietly, staring at the cradle she had once bought in hope of a child. It stood empty in the corner, a cruel reminder of her scars. But instead of throwing it away, she placed a gentle hand on it and whispered, "One day, you'll hold hope for others." The neighbors noticed her change. Ruth Miller, once her loudest critic, muttered suspiciously, "She looks too calm, too strong. What is she hiding?" And in another part of town, David laughed with Sophia at a lavish dinner, raising his glass high. "Grace is finished," he bragged. "She'll fade into nothing while we rise." Sophia smirked, resting her head on his shoulder, but deep in her eyes was a flicker of calculation, a secret she had not yet shared. While Grace rebuilt in silence, David's arrogance would soon collide with his own downfall, and Sophia's plotting would open the cracks wider than he ever imagined. The banquet hall thundered with applause as David Williams raised his glass high. Sophia Turner, glowing in a tight red gown, rested her hand on her stomach with exaggerated grace. Cameras flashed from every corner, reporters leaning forward eagerly. "My friends," David boomed, his voice dripping with pride. "The years of waiting are over. My wife Sophia is expecting my child. At last, the Williams legacy continues." The crowd erupted in cheers. Ruth Miller clapped loudly, shouting across the hall, "Finally, he chose the right woman." Helen Williams, his mother, wept with joy, gripping Sophia's hand as though she were her own daughter. Grace's name, once spoken with whispers of pity, was now mocked with laughter. Naomi Brooks, the journalist who had shamed Grace before, scribbled down the headlines gleefully. "Business mogul David Williams celebrates his wife's pregnancy." But not everyone cheered. Paul Stevens, David's longtime competitor, leaned back in his chair smirking. A man in his 40s, sharp-eyed and calculating, he had watched David's arrogance grow unchecked for years. He leaned toward Sophia with a subtle smile. "Congratulations, Mrs. Williams," he said softly. "But remember, pride can be the beginning of a man's downfall." Sophia's eyes flickered, catching the hidden meaning in his words. She smiled sweetly, but deep inside, a seed of temptation began to grow. Meanwhile, Patrick Cole, David's business partner, clinked glasses half-heartedly. He had stood by David for years, but even he noticed the cracks. Profits were slipping, deals were shaky. Yet David strutted through the night as if untouchable. Patrick whispered under his breath, "Careful, David. You're flying too close to the sun." Back at her quiet home, Grace heard the news from Miriam and Evelyn. The papers screamed David's triumph. Sophia flaunted her glow, and the city praised their new beginning. Grace sat in silence, the sting sharp but not surprising. Miriam squeezed her hand. "They mock you now, but pride always comes before a fall." Grace nodded slowly. Her eyes fell on Jonathan's letter, framed neatly on her desk. Instead of bitterness, she felt a calm determination. "Let him boast. His pride will destroy him. I don't need revenge. Truth will speak for itself." Still, the pain was real. Alone in her room, she pressed a hand against the empty cradle and whispered, "They'll never know what this emptiness has taught me, but one day they will see what I've built." Back at the banquet, David stood before the cameras, Sophia clinging to his arm like a prize. His laughter was loud, his arrogance unmatched. But across the hall, Paul Stevens watched with hawk-like eyes. Later that night, he pulled Sophia aside, his voice low. "David is drunk with pride," Paul said smoothly. "But pride doesn't pay bills. His contracts are weak. His empire is crumbling. And you, Sophia, you could have more than he can ever give." Sophia's lips parted, her pulse quickening. Lydia Scott, her greedy friend, had whispered similar words days ago. "Don't tie yourself down to one man. Wealth is bigger than love." Sophia glanced back at David, laughing with glass in hand. Blind to the trap forming around him, a sly smile crept across her face. Soon Sophia's loyalty would waver, and betrayal would no longer be Grace's alone. It would come for David too. Sophia Turner leaned across the polished mahogany table, her voice low and sharp. "So you're telling me David's contracts are already collapsing?" Paul Stevens, the ruthless business competitor, smiled thinly, tapping his fingers against his glass. "Not just collapsing, they're mine now. His pride blinded him. I've pulled 2 major clients already. Soon his empire will bleed." Sophia's eyes gleamed. For months she had been paraded as David's prize, the new wife who promised him heirs. But behind the glossy photos and champagne nights, she saw the cracks forming, and Paul's words were gasoline to her fire. From the corner, Lydia Scott, her greedy friend, leaned forward eagerly. "You hear that, Sophia? David's slipping. Don't go down with him. Hitch yourself to a man who can keep you shining." Sophia hesitated, twirling the diamond bracelet David had bought her. "He gave me everything. He left his wife for me. How can I just—" Lydia cut her off with a laugh. "He left his wife for you because he was weak, and weak men fall, Sophia. Don't be foolish. Look around you. Power is shifting. You can either sink with David or swim with someone stronger." The words hung heavy in the air. Just then, the doors opened, and in walked Anthony Blake, a rival investor, younger, richer, and colder than David. His tailored suit gleamed, his smile as sharp as a blade. He bent over Sophia's hand and kissed it lightly, his eyes never leaving hers. "David brags too much," Anthony said smoothly. "I don't invest in noise. I invest in vision. And Sophia," he smirked, "you have potential beyond being his ornament." Sophia's breath caught. His words cut straight to the place in her heart where greed and ambition lived. Paul leaned back, satisfied. "Work with us, Sophia. Feed me information. Whisper his weaknesses. In return, you'll secure yourself a future David could never afford." Sophia's mind raced. She remembered her past. Long nights as a nurse, scrubbing floors, changing sheets, envying the women who walked out of the hospital draped in wealth and perfume. She had sworn she would never be small again. David had been her escape. But now, maybe he was just a step. She looked at Lydia, who nodded eagerly. She looked at Anthony, whose eyes sparkled with promise. Then she looked at Paul, steady and ruthless, offering her the rope to climb higher. Her lips curved into a slow smile. Fine. If David's empire is crumbling, I won't go down with him. Tell me what you need, and I'll give it to you. Paul extended his hand, and she shook it firmly. The deal was sealed. Back at home, David raised another toast to himself, blind to the betrayal brewing in his own bed. He believed Sophia was his future, but Sophia had already begun writing his ruin. While Sophia plotted in secret, David's pride would soon drive him back to Grace, not for love, but for greed disguised as concern. The sharp knock on the door made Grace flinch. Miriam rushed to answer, but froze when she saw the figure standing outside. David Williams, her former husband, the man who had humiliated her in court, who had paraded Sophia as his prize. Now here he was, standing with a forced smile, holding a bouquet of flowers that looked more like props than an offering of love. Grace stepped into the hallway, her heart thudding. Evelyn Carter moved quietly to her side, her presence steady as a shield. David spread his arms, his voice unusually soft. Grace, it's been too long. I just wanted to check on you. How are you holding up? His words dripped with false concern. Grace's eyes narrowed. Why are you here, David? You made it clear I was nothing to you. He sighed dramatically, lowering the flowers onto the table. Grace, don't be so harsh. I know things ended badly, but I can't forget the years we spent together. I needed to see if you're coping. I worry about you sometimes. Evelyn stepped forward, her tone sharp. Mr. Williams, you didn't worry when you dragged her name through court. Why now? David ignored her, turning his eyes back to Grace. You know me better than anyone. I'm under pressure these days. Business is hard. People I trusted are slipping away. But you, he leaned closer, lowering his voice. You always manage the home, the bills, the accounts. Tell me, how are you managing now? Do you have enough to survive? Grace's chest tightened. She recognized the trap in his words. This was not love. It was greed, hidden beneath a mask of care. She steadied her voice, calm but distant. I manage. You don't need to concern yourself with my survival. That's no longer your place. David's eyes flickered with frustration. He forced another smile. Grace, I'm just saying, if you ever needed to lean on someone, I'd still be there. I know I hurt you, but I still want to be part of your life. Grace's lips trembled, but not with longing, with anger. No, David, you don't want to be part of my life. You want to know if I've fallen low enough for you to feel powerful again, but you'll get nothing from me. Evelyn's hand touched Grace's shoulder, a silent reminder. Don't reveal the inheritance. David's face hardened. He picked up the flowers, crushed them in his hand, and dropped them on the floor. You'll regret treating me this way, Grace. You think you're strong, but this world is cruel. Don't be surprised if it swallows you whole. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Grace leaned against the wall, her chest heaving, but her voice calm. He doesn't know, and he never will. Evelyn nodded, her eyes sharp. Keep your silence. Grace, the less he knows, the stronger you are. Yet even as she spoke, far across town, Naomi Brooks flipped through David's financial records with Cynthia, her eager intern, and what they found would soon shake the city. The mask was about to fall. David's corruption would no longer stay hidden. Stacks of papers scattered across the newsroom table as Naomi Brooks slammed her hand down. This doesn't add up, she snapped, frustration flashing in her eyes. She was known for chasing scandal, the journalist who had once written, "Barren wife humiliated by husband." That headline had made her name. But now, as she looked at David Williams's financial reports, something darker glared back. Beside her sat Cynthia Moore, her young intern, barely 22 but relentless, her glasses slipping down her nose as she pored over bank statements. Look here, Naomi, Cynthia said, pointing to a highlighted line. David transferred company funds into Sophia Turner's personal account. Not once, but 5 times. He's bleeding his own empire to keep her comfortable. Naomi's eyes narrowed. And the investors? Cynthia flipped another file. Paul Stevens has already filed claims. Contracts are collapsing. David is drowning, and he's hiding it. Naomi leaned back, stunned. For years, she had chased stories that painted women like Grace as weak and pitiful. But now the truth hit her. David wasn't a hero freeing himself from a barren wife. He was a fraud, using arrogance to cover his collapse. Just then, Evelyn Carter walked into the small office, a folder in her hand. She spoke softly, her eyes steady. Grace asked me to give you this. No names, no connections, just evidence. She placed the folder on the desk and left without another word. Naomi hesitated, then opened it. Inside were copies of bank statements, contracts, and even private letters from business partners, all pointing to David's deceit. Her throat tightened. She knew. Grace knew, but she stayed silent. Cynthia leaned closer, whispering, Maybe it's time you stop mocking her, Naomi. Maybe it's time you tell her side of the story. Naomi's fingers trembled as she picked up her pen. For the first time, she didn't see Grace as a victim. She saw her as a survivor, silent, strong, and dignified. She pressed the pen down hard against her notebook, writing the words that would flip the narrative. Husband exposed, betrayed wife holds the power. By morning, the headlines spread across the city. Coffee shops buzzed with talk. Markets rang with whispers. Ruth Miller gasped as she held the paper. David, a fraud. For the first time, her smirk faltered. Inside his office, David crumpled the paper in his fists, his face red with rage. Naomi, that snake. She was supposed to be on my side. Sophia glanced at him coldly, her patience thinning. Paul Stevens' words echoed in her ear. David is already sinking. Her eyes darted toward her phone, where a new message from Anthony Blake blinked. Back in her quiet home, Grace read the article with tears in her eyes. Not tears of shame this time, but of quiet vindication. For the first time, the world was beginning to see the truth, but David's fury was only beginning. The empire he boasted of would soon come crashing down, dragging everyone tied to him into the rubble. The boardroom erupted in chaos. Contracts slammed onto the table, investors shouting over each other. David Williams stood at the head of the table, sweat dripping down his temple, his once proud smile gone. Enough, he bellowed, slamming his fist down. I am still in control. But the voices only grew louder. Control? You've been funneling company funds into private accounts, one investor shouted. Another threw a file across the table. Paul Stevens has already taken 3 of your clients. You're finished, David. The room emptied in minutes, chairs scraping against the floor, the sound of footsteps echoing like hammers of judgment. David was left alone, his hands gripping the table until his knuckles turned white. That afternoon, Judge Harrison signed an order, his voice grim as he spoke in court. Assets of Mr. David Williams are hereby frozen pending further investigation. The gavel struck, the sound final, crushing. David staggered out of the courthouse, his tie loose, reporters swarming him. Cameras flashed as Naomi Brooks, once his ally, pushed forward. Mr. Williams, do you deny the allegations of fraud? Do you admit to misusing company funds? His face twisted with rage. You think you can destroy me with lies? I built this city. I'll rise again. He shoved through the crowd, but the words rang hollow. At home, Helen Williams clutched her pearls, pacing back and forth. This cannot be happening. My son is not a criminal. He is a victim of jealousy. Grace cursed him. I know it. But her voice trembled, betraying her fear. Inside the shadows of his office, Inspector Adam Reed, a sharp-eyed officer known for uncovering high-level fraud, pinned David's file to the board. Wire transfers, forged contracts, tax evasion. We've got enough to bring him down hard. His voice was steady, but his eyes burned with determination. Next step, arrest. Meanwhile, David poured himself another glass of whiskey, sitting alone in the dark. Gone were the parties, the laughter, the applause. Even Patrick Cole, once his loyal partner, had deserted him. Sorry, David, Patrick's last message had read. Business is business. I can't sink with you. David's hand trembled as he lifted the glass. He thought of Grace for the first time in weeks. Her calm eyes, her quiet dignity. She had walked away with nothing, or so he believed. A bitter laugh escaped his lips. Maybe she was stronger than I thought. But Sophia was nowhere to be found. Calls went unanswered. Her perfume no longer lingered in the halls. For the first time, David felt truly alone. The next morning, the city awoke to headlines. David Williams under fraud investigation. Assets frozen. Contracts lost. Naomi's pen had finished what his pride had started. And as he stood at his office window, staring at the empire crumbling beneath him, a shadow crossed his heart. If Sophia was not by his side now, where was she? The answer would come soon, and it would cut deeper than he ever imagined. Sophia's betrayal was about to be revealed. David stormed into the penthouse apartment, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled in the frame. "Sophia!" he shouted, his voice hoarse from whiskey and sleepless nights. "Where are you?" But the rooms were empty. The wardrobe stood half open, hangers bare. Jewelry boxes were gone. Drawers emptied. His chest tightened as he staggered toward the vanity table. The perfume bottles, the silk scarves, the little reminders of Sophia, all gone. On the bed lay a single note in her elegant handwriting. "David, you promised me a future. Instead, you gave me a crumbling empire. I will not sink with you. Goodbye." David crushed the letter in his fist, his roar echoing through the empty room. Meanwhile, across the city, Sophia was already stepping out of a sleek black car. At her side was Anthony Blake, the wealthy rival investor whose fortune dwarfed David's. His arm wrapped firmly around her waist, his lips brushing her ear. "You chose well," he whispered. "David was a fool. Stay with me, and you'll never taste failure again." On the red-carpeted steps of a gala, cameras flashed wildly as Sophia clung to Anthony, her face glowing with triumph. Reporters gasped, scribbling headlines. "Former nurse turned socialite queen." But not everyone applauded. Gloria Harris, a sharp-tongued socialite known for her biting remarks, smirked as she sipped champagne nearby. "Look at her. She thinks wealth makes her untouchable. Give it time. Men like Anthony don't keep ornaments. They replace them." The words stung, but Sophia ignored them, raising her chin higher. She had climbed too far to care. Back in her quiet home, Grace heard whispers of Sophia's betrayal through Ruth Miller, the neighbor who had once mocked her endlessly. Ruth's voice carried a strange mix of shock and awe. "I never thought I'd see the day. David abandoned you for her, and now she's abandoned him. Maybe you were the stronger one all along, Grace." Grace didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply pressed her hand against the cradle in the corner, whispering softly, "The same cradle they mocked me for. One day, it will stand for hope." Her quiet dignity spoke louder than any revenge. But David's world was unraveling. Alone in his empty penthouse, he clutched a bottle, staring out over the city skyline. His phone buzzed with notifications, headlines mocking him, creditors demanding payment. Sophia and Anthony splashed across every magazine cover. He sank to his knees, whispering, "Sophia, how could you?" Across town, Sophia's triumph was already fading. Anthony, cold and calculating, excused himself halfway through the gala. He didn't even glance back. Lydia Scott, her so-called friend, slipped away too, chasing another wealthy prospect. Suddenly, Sophia stood alone in the glittering hall, the laughter around her sounding cruel. And from the shadows, Gloria Harris's voice rang out again, sharper this time. "You thought you won, dear. But in this world, gold doesn't make you loved. It only makes you disposable." Sophia's smile faltered, her chest tightening with dread. While Sophia tasted betrayal, David's final reckoning was drawing closer. And soon he would be forced to kneel before the very woman he once discarded. The courtyard of the New Dawn Foundation roared with applause as Grace Williams cut the ribbon, the crowd cheering for the woman who had turned her pain into power. Cameras flashed, banners waved, and women once mocked for being childless wept openly, seeing their dignity restored through her. Suddenly the noise broke. David Williams, once the city's proud mogul, stumbled through the crowd. His clothes were wrinkled, his face unshaven, his eyes hollow from nights of whiskey and shame. He dropped to his knees in front of Grace, his voice cracking like a man drowning. "Grace, please, I've lost everything. Sophia betrayed me. My empire is gone. I have nothing left. But you've risen higher than ever. I was blind, cruel, arrogant. Take me back. Please, save me." Gasps spread through the crowd. Reporters shoved forward, microphones trembling in their hands. The man who once humiliated Grace in public was now crawling at her feet. Grace looked down at him, her face calm, her eyes blazing with strength. For a moment, the silence was deafening. The crowd leaned in, holding its breath. Finally, her voice cut through like a blade. "David Williams, when you threw divorce papers in my face, you thought you destroyed me. When you paraded Sophia, you thought you replaced me. When you mocked me as Baron, you thought you defined me. But you were wrong." She stepped back, her gown flowing as the wind carried her words across the courtyard. "You want forgiveness? No, David, you will never have it. You want my hand again? Never. You will live with the memory of what you lost, because dignity does not return to those who trample it." The crowd erupted in cheers. Some wept, others shouted, "Bravo!" Even Ruth Miller, the gossiping neighbor, wiped tears from her eyes, whispering, "She was stronger than all of us." David's face crumpled as he reached for her hem, but Evelyn Carter, loyal and firm, stepped between them. "Leave her be. You threw her away. Now you must live with that choice." Grace turned to the podium, raising her voice so all could hear. "This foundation is my answer to betrayal. It is proof that women discarded can rise again. That rejection is not the end, but the beginning. And as for David," she looked back at him, still on his knees, "he will watch me thrive while he remains in the dust." Behind her, the once empty cradle stood tall at the entrance, now filled with flowers, letters, and symbols of hope. It had transformed from a mark of humiliation into a banner of rebirth. Naomi Brooks, the journalist who had once mocked her, wiped her eyes as she typed the final headline. "Grace Williams rejects husband's plea. A nation applauds her triumph." The crowd's cheers rose like thunder as Grace lifted her chin, radiant and unshaken. David remained kneeling, shattered and ignored, his last hope crushed under the weight of her strength. For David, this was the end. For Grace, it was the dawn of a legacy that no betrayal could erase. Husband divorced his poor wife after her business failed, unaware of her $100 million fortune. He didn't just leave her, he destroyed her in front of the world. On the same day her boutique turned to ashes, he threw divorce papers in her trembling hands and walked away with her own employee. "Failure is all you'll ever be, Emma. You're nothing to me now. Sign this and disappear." Those were the cruel words Mark spat as her tears fell onto the paper. Instead of holding her through the storm, he handed her to humiliation. Instead of loyalty, he chose betrayal. He thought she would remain broken, forgotten, buried under whispers of shame. But what he never knew was that the woman he cast aside carried a secret, a fortune waiting to rise with her, a gift that would not only rebuild her life, but also strip away the pride he wore like a crown. Sometimes the ones you discard become the ones you cannot escape. Sometimes the woman you mock as worthless becomes the very name the world applauds. This is not just another tale of betrayal. It is the cry of a heart abandoned, the journey of a soul crushed and rebuilt, and the reminder that dignity shines brightest after the darkest nights. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it is like letting her voice fade again into silence. But when you click that button, you stand with every woman betrayed, every dream torn apart, and every survivor who chose to rise. Please subscribe now, and in the comments, share where you're watching from. Let Emma know she is not alone. The boutique door slammed open, and Emma stumbled inside carrying 3 heavy bags of fabrics, her hands trembling from exhaustion. It was past midnight, the street outside empty, but her light still burned. Dust clung to her cheeks, and her once elegant dress was marked with stains from hours of work. She had spent the entire day meeting suppliers, negotiating prices, and delivering finished clothes to customers herself. Yet when she entered her small apartment upstairs, Mark, her husband, was sprawled lazily on the couch, television flickering before his face, a glass of wine in his hand. He didn't even look up. "Finally," he muttered, eyes fixed on the screen. "Took you long enough. Did you bring the money?" His voice was sharp, not with concern but with entitlement. Emma's heart sank. She wanted to tell him how she had skipped meals to save on costs, how she had walked miles because she couldn't afford transport, how her feet burned from standing in the market all day. But she swallowed the words. Instead, she placed a crumpled envelope of cash on the table. Mark snatched it without gratitude, flipping through the notes. "Not enough. How do you expect us to live like this? Look at me, Emma. I should be a man with status, not living off scraps from your little shop." Emma blinked back tears, but her voice remained steady. "I'm trying, Mark. The boutique is growing. I just need more time. Every cent goes back into keeping it alive." From the corner, Anna, their young employee, barely 22, with quiet eyes that seemed too observant, stood arranging new fabric on the shelf. She watched silently, lips pressed tight, as Emma's devotion was met with scorn. The neighbors outside whispered whenever they passed. "That Emma works herself to death while her husband enjoys himself," they would say. Some admired her determination, but most mocked the imbalance. "She doesn't know she's married to her own burden." Emma ignored their voices. She believed love required sacrifice. She believed her efforts would one day turn their lives around. Her boutique was not just a business, it was her dream. Her way of proving she could build something lasting. But as she watched Mark pour himself another drink with money she had earned, doubt crept into her heart like a shadow. Anna broke the silence, her voice calm but edged with something Emma didn't notice. "Don't worry, ma'am. Hard work never fails. One day you'll be rewarded." Emma gave her a tired smile, grateful for the encouragement, never realizing Anna's eyes lingered too long on Mark. That night, Emma collapsed into bed, whispering a prayer for strength. She had no idea the storm was closer than she thought, and that her sacrifices would soon be tested in ways she could never imagine. She believed her boutique was unshakable, but before dawn, fate would prove her wrong. The night sky glowed red. Emma shot up from her bed as neighbors screamed in the street. When she threw open the window, her heart froze. Her boutique was on fire. Flames licked through the wooden beams, swallowing the signboard she had painted with her own hands. Sparks hissed into the air, and the smell of smoke choked her lungs. "Emma! Emma!" a neighbor shouted, banging on her door. "Your shop! Hurry!" Barefoot, she ran down the stairs, the ground scorching beneath her steps. A small crowd had already gathered, some pointing in shock, others whispering. Water buckets were passed, but the fire was too strong, too fast. In seconds, her shelves, fabrics, and hard work of years crumbled into ash. Emma dropped to her knees, tears streaming. She reached out as if her hands could hold the collapsing beams, but they fell with a roar, forcing her back. Behind her, Mark appeared, not to comfort her, but to sigh with annoyance. "Unbelievable. All my plans ruined because of your carelessness," he hissed, clutching his robe as if the smoke dirtied him. Emma looked at him, trembling. "Our boutique. It's gone, Mark. Everything is gone." Instead of holding her, he spat on the ground. "Not ours, Emma, yours. I never asked you to waste your life in that little shop. Now look, nothing but debt and shame." His words cut sharper than the flames. Moments later, a stern voice broke through the chaos. Mr. Cole, the local bank manager, marched toward them, his tall frame commanding silence. He had loaned Emma money to expand the boutique months ago. His face was tight with anger. "Emma," he said firmly, ignoring the fire, "this is a disaster. Do you realize how much you still owe us? Your collateral won't cover it. You need to find a way to pay immediately." Emma stammered, "Please, Mr. Cole, give me time. I'll rebuild, I promise." But Mr. Cole's eyes narrowed. "Hope does not pay debts. Banks need results, not promises. You have 1 week before legal action begins." The crowd murmured. Mrs. Harris, Emma's mother-in-law, stepped forward, her lips curled with disgust. "Didn't I warn you, Mark?" she said loud enough for all to hear. "This woman brings nothing but disgrace. She drags you down, and you stand here like a fool defending her? Shame on you both." Mark's jaw tightened, but instead of defending Emma, he turned away. His silence spoke louder than words. He was already slipping from her side. Emma wrapped her arms around herself as the fire hissed lower, leaving only blackened ruins. Her boutique, her sweat, her sacrifices, gone in one cruel night. But worse than the fire was the shift she felt in the people around her. Their eyes no longer saw her as a fighter. They saw her as a failure. And in the corner, Anna stood with folded arms, her gaze calm, almost too calm. Emma thought the fire had destroyed enough, but the real flames, the ones inside her marriage, were only just beginning to burn. The slap echoed through the small apartment like a gunshot. Mark's palm had struck Emma across the cheek, leaving her stunned and trembling. She clutched her face, staring at the man she once called her partner. "All this time," he spat, pacing the room, "I carried your shame. People laugh at me in the streets, Emma. They whisper that I live off a failed woman. Do you think I'll let you drag me down forever?" Emma's lips quivered. "I lost everything in the fire, Mark. I'm trying to hold us together. Can't you see that?" But his eyes were full of contempt. "Trying? You're nothing but a weight on my shoulders. I need a wife who lifts me, not one who buries me in ashes." The words pierced deeper than the blow. Emma turned away, tears falling silently. She had given him her best years, her strength, her dreams. Now in her weakest moment, he treated her as nothing. At that moment, Aunt Marion, Emma's bitter aunt, arrived, her voice shrill as she entered. She had never liked Emma and often favored Mark. "I told you, Emma," she said coldly, hands on her hips. "This marriage was bound to fail. A man like Mark deserves better than a woman who can't even keep a business alive. You should be ashamed." Emma's heart twisted. To be blamed by her own family was a wound she could hardly bear. Meanwhile, outside the apartment, neighbors gossiped loudly. Their whispers carried through the thin walls. "Poor Emma, she tried too hard. But look at her now. Nothing left. And her husband, already slipping away." Some pitied her, but most mocked. The same mouths that once praised her determination now laughed at her failure. Even her old customers, once loyal, drifted elsewhere. Her quality was good, they muttered, but who trusts a woman who can't manage her own life? The betrayal stung, not in coins, but in trust lost. In the shadows, Anna moved quietly around the boutique's ashes, offering Emma soft words of encouragement, but her eyes often strayed toward Mark. She carried baskets of salvaged cloth, as if helping, but her smile toward Emma's husband lingered longer than it should. Emma clung to hope, whispering to herself at night, "This storm will pass. He'll see I'm still the same woman he loved." But even as she prayed, she felt the distance growing. The warmth of love was turning into the cold silence of resentment. One evening when she brought Mark his dinner, he shoved the plate away. "I don't want your pity food. Maybe I need a woman who knows how to succeed, not one who drags me into shame." His eyes flicked toward Anna, who stood quietly in the doorway, and Emma's heart sank with a new fear she dared not name. Emma thought she was fighting only the fire's aftermath, but another fire, one burning in secrecy, was already consuming her home. The kiss was sudden, stolen in the shadows of the ruined boutique. Mark's lips brushed against Anna's, his hand gripping her wrist. Emma's trusted employee gasped, but instead of pulling away, she smiled faintly. "If Emma finds out," Anna whispered. Mark smirked, lowering his voice. "She won't. She's too blind with failure to notice anything. Besides, you're the only one who understands me now." That night, Emma walked into the shop's burnt shell to find Anna dusting charred shelves. The young woman greeted her warmly, as if nothing had happened. "Don't lose hope, ma'am. You're stronger than this. I'll stay by your side no matter what." Her words dripped with loyalty, and Emma, weary and broken, believed them. But Anna's friend Lydia, bold and greedy, whispered poison into Anna's ear whenever they met in the market. "Why waste time helping Emma?" Lydia sneered. "Mark is a man with ambition. Stay close to him, and you'll live a life of comfort. Forget loyalty. Loyalty doesn't buy silk dresses or fine wine." Anna hesitated, torn between appearances of kindness and the lure of greed. Her eyes sparkled when she imagined the life Lydia promised. Meanwhile, Mark's old friend Lucas slapped him on the back in a local bar. Lucas was the kind who thrived on ego and arrogance, a man who lived for shallow victories. "Why chain yourself to a sinking ship?" he laughed, sipping his drink. "You've got youth on your side, money to make, women to chase. That wife of yours, she's dead weight. A man like you deserves better." Mark nodded, drinking in the flattery. Lucas's words ignited something dangerous inside him. The belief that leaving Emma wasn't betrayal, but freedom. Back at home, Emma worked late into the night, sketching plans for a new boutique with trembling hands. She didn't see how Mark lingered longer by Anna's side. She didn't hear the whispers exchanged behind her back. She still believed her sacrifices bound them together. "Mark," she said softly one evening, serving him dinner, "thank you for staying with me. I know things are hard, but I promise I'll rise again. I'll make you proud." He looked at her, silent for a moment, then forced a smile. "Of course, Emma. I'll always stand by you." His words felt like comfort, but in his eyes there was no love, only calculation. Later that night, while Emma wept quietly in her room, Mark and Anna exchanged another secret glance. False loyalty had wrapped itself around Emma's world like a snake, and she had no idea its fangs were already aimed at her heart. Emma believed his promises, but the world would soon see those same promises ripped apart. Not in whispers, but in the glare of public betrayal. The courtroom gasped as the papers slammed onto the wooden desk. Mark had thrown them with a smirk, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Sign them, Emma. Today you stop embarrassing me as my wife." Emma froze, her trembling hand hovering over the divorce documents. Her heart raced. She had not been warned, not even in whispers at home. To be summoned here, in front of strangers, only to be humiliated by the man she once trusted, was a cruelty beyond words. The judge glanced at her with pity. Neighbors packed the benches, whispering as if they had come to watch a play. "She worked like a slave, and this is her reward?" one murmured. Another replied, "Maybe she deserves it. A woman who can't keep her husband happy loses her place." And then, like salt on a fresh wound, Anna walked in. Her steps were deliberate, her smile unapologetic. She slid into the seat beside Mark, her hand resting boldly on his arm. Gasps rippled across the room. Emma's eyes widened in disbelief. "Anna, you?" Her voice cracked. Anna tilted her chin proudly. "Don't look so shocked, ma'am. Some of us know how to hold on to a man." Her words dripped with venom disguised as sweetness. Mark leaned back in his chair, enjoying the spectacle. "She's not just my new partner in life, Emma. She'll help me rebuild everything you ruined. This is the woman I should have chosen from the start." Emma's chest tightened. Every sacrifice, every late night, every tear for this man had been reduced to public ashes. In the back row, Mrs. Harris, her mother-in-law, shook her head with approval. "Finally, my son sees sense," she muttered, loud enough for others to hear. Emma was a curse to him from the beginning. Emma's pen slipped from her grasp. She looked around, searching for a kind face. But all she found were whispers, mockery, and silence. Her dreams, her dignity, her marriage, all torn apart in one brutal act. Still, she steadied herself. "Mark," she said softly, her voice carrying more pain than anger. "You don't know what you're doing. Betrayal doesn't bring happiness. It only destroys." But Mark laughed bitterly. "What destroys is failure, Emma. And you are failure itself." The judge cleared his throat, signaling the end of the session. But Emma's world had already ended long before his gavel struck. She gathered the shredded remains of her courage and walked out, her steps heavy, her heart bleeding. Behind her, Anna kissed Mark's cheek in front of the crowd, sealing the humiliation. The spectators erupted in whispers. The betrayal was no longer hidden. It was paraded like a crown. Emma thought the courtroom was the lowest point, but true isolation was waiting outside, a silence more painful than public shame. The door slammed shut behind her, the sound echoing like a final sentence. Emma staggered into her empty apartment, collapsing onto the floor. The silence pressed in, heavier than the courtroom whispers. Her chest heaved as sobs ripped through her body. For the first time in years, she was utterly alone. She curled into herself, hands clutching her arms as if to hold the pieces of her soul together. The betrayal in court, the mocking eyes of neighbors, Anna's smug smile. It all replayed in her mind like knives cutting deeper with every memory. Suddenly, a knock rattled the door. Hope flickered for a moment. Maybe Mark had come back. Maybe it was all a mistake. But when she opened it, Aunt Marion stood there, her expression sharp and cold. "You brought this on yourself," Marion said without hesitation. "I warned you that Mark deserved better. Now look at you. No husband, no business, nothing. You're a disgrace to this family." Emma's knees buckled, but she clung to the doorframe, whispering, "Aunt, please. Not now." Marion scoffed and turned away. "Don't expect sympathy. You're alone because you chose to fail." Emma sank to the floor, tears blurring her vision. Hours later, the door creaked open gently. James, her quiet cousin, stepped in. He was a man in his 30s with kind eyes and a soft presence that always made Emma feel safe. Without words, he knelt beside her, offering a handkerchief. "You don't deserve this," James said softly. "I've watched you give everything, Emma. Don't let his betrayal define you." Emma clutched the handkerchief, her tears soaking it. "But James, I have nothing left. How can I stand when everything has been taken?" He placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You still have yourself, and you still have people who won't leave you." Moments later, Miriam, her longtime caregiver and helper, entered with a bag of food. Her face was lined with age, but her heart was steady as stone. She set the bag down and cupped Emma's face in her rough hands. "Child," Miriam said gently, "you've carried too much on your own. Cry if you must, but tomorrow you will rise. Pain is not the end. It is a beginning in disguise." Emma's sobs slowed as the warmth of James's loyalty and Miriam's comfort surrounded her. Yet outside the window, the voices of neighbors still pierced the night. "Did you hear? Mark left her in court. She's finished. She'll never recover. Some women are just born to be forgotten." The words sliced through the fragile peace inside, reminding Emma that the world was already writing her off. She pulled the blanket over herself, her eyes red but open. Sleep would not come, only the ache of loss and the fear of tomorrow. And in the darkness, a thought whispered across her heart. What if they were right? Emma believed despair had buried her, but a letter waiting in the shadows would soon ignite a spark she thought was lost forever. The envelope hit the table with a heavy thud. Ms. Adams, a well-dressed lawyer in her 40s with sharp eyes and a calm presence, looked straight at Emma. "This arrived at my office weeks ago. It's addressed to you, from your late Uncle Richard." Emma's hands shook as she reached for it. Uncle Richard had been distant, a man she hadn't seen in years. Why now? Why her? She tore it open, the paper inside trembling with her breath. "My dear Emma," the letter began, "I know this may reach you in your darkest hour. I have watched from afar, silent but never uncaring. Life has tested you, and though you may feel broken, I see strength in you others do not. I leave you with more than wealth. I leave you with a chance to rise, to rebuild, and to shine again. But remember, this gift comes with a condition. Use it not for vengeance, but for good. Only then will it bear fruit." Tears blurred Emma's eyes. She clutched the letter to her chest, her heart pounding. For the first time since the fire, something other than despair stirred inside her. A spark, fragile but alive. James leaned closer, his voice gentle. "Emma, this is more than money. This is hope." Miriam, standing behind her, wiped a tear with the edge of her scarf. "Child, didn't I say pain is the beginning of something new? Your uncle saw what we see. You are stronger than this storm." Emma's voice cracked. "But what if I fail again? What if I waste even this?" Miss Adams' gaze softened. "Then you rise again. This is not about failure, Emma. It's about purpose. Your uncle believed in you. I do too." Pastor John, the local faith elder who had come with Miss Adams, stepped forward quietly. His voice was low but steady, like a stream in the night. "Emma, trials are not meant to destroy us. They are fires that refine us. This letter is not just about wealth. It is a reminder that you were never forgotten. You are chosen to be a light." Emma gripped the paper tighter. For the first time, she felt a flicker of courage stirring through the ashes of her pain. Yet outside, The whispers of neighbors grew louder. Did you hear? She's still clinging to hope, poor fool. Mark has moved on. She'll never recover. Emma closed her eyes, blocking out their voices. For the first time, she didn't crumble under them. For the first time, she stood. I will not waste this gift, she whispered to herself, her voice steady now. I will rise, not for revenge, but for dignity. But as she folded the letter, Miss Adams added quietly, Emma, what you read is only the beginning. The full weight of your uncle's gift will change everything. Emma's breath caught. The spark of courage flickered brighter. Though she could not yet see the fire it was about to ignite. She thought the letter was hope enough, but the true inheritance and its secrecy would turn her life in ways she could not imagine. The sound of the vault door unlocking echoed like thunder. Emma stepped into the private office of Miss Adams' law firm, her heart pounding. On the polished mahogany desk lay a stack of sealed folders and documents, thicker than any book she had ever held. Daniela, Miss Adams's young assistant, greeted her with a warm smile and guided her to the chair. Mrs. Emma, Daniela said softly, her tone full of kindness. Everything you are about to hear is confidential. No one, not your husband, not your neighbors, not even your relatives, must know until you are ready. Emma swallowed hard. She nodded, gripping the arms of the chair as though it were the only thing keeping her upright. Miss Adams adjusted her glasses, her eyes steady. Your uncle's letter was only a glimpse. Today I reveal the full truth. He left you an inheritance of $100 million. Emma gasped, her breath catching in her throat. The number felt unreal, like a dream she dared not believe. Her fingers trembled as she whispered, 100 million? Yes, Miss Adams confirmed. Investments, properties, and trust accounts. He built a fortune, and he left it entirely to you. But remember, he left it with conditions. Use it to rebuild, to bless others, and never to seek revenge. That is the path he chose for you. Emma covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. For months she had been crushed under debt, mocked by neighbors, and stripped of dignity in court. Now in one moment, her world shifted. She was no longer powerless. James, who had come to support her, leaned closer. Emma, this is your chance. You can start again. Stronger, wiser, untouchable. Daniela stepped forward with another folder. These are the papers securing your inheritance in full. I will personally ensure all transactions remain private. No one will discover your wealth until you decide. You are safe with us. Emma looked into Daniela's kind eyes and saw something she hadn't felt in a long time. Trust. She nodded firmly. Thank you. I don't want revenge. I want to rebuild with dignity. My uncle will not be disappointed. Pastor John, who had been invited to witness, clasped her hands gently. This is more than fortune, Emma. This is a calling. Wealth in the wrong hands destroys, but in yours it can heal. Never forget the power of compassion. Emma wiped her tears, straightened her shoulders, and signed the final page. The ink felt like fire on paper, a new chapter burning into existence. As she closed the folder, Miss Adams leaned back, her expression serious. Emma, I must warn you, wealth attracts shadows. People who abandoned you will try to return. You must be prepared. Emma exhaled slowly, her resolve hardening. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of tomorrow. Emma thought secrecy would protect her, but the first shadow, her husband, was already plotting his way back into her life. The knock on Emma's door was sharp, desperate. When she opened it, Mark stood there, his eyes swollen with fake tears, his suit wrinkled as though he had been suffering. Without waiting for permission, he pushed inside and dropped to his knees. Emma, he pleaded, grabbing her hands. I made a mistake. I was blind. I let anger and pride destroy us. Please forgive me. Give me another chance. Emma froze. The same man who had humiliated her in court now knelt at her feet. For a brief moment, her heart remembered the years they shared. But then the images of betrayal flooded back. His words, Anna's smug smile, the sting of abandonment. She pulled her hands away slowly. Mark, why now? Why come back after all you've done? Mark forced a trembling smile. Because I realized I cannot live without you. Anna, she's not you. She doesn't understand me like you do. You're my wife, Emma. We belong together. What he didn't know was that Emma already carried her uncle's secret inheritance. She studied his face carefully, and for the first time, she saw not love, only calculation. At a distance, Anna's voice cut through the silence. She had followed him, heels clicking against the pavement as she entered uninvited. Her eyes narrowed at Emma, her words dripping with venom. Don't be fooled, Emma. He's here because he pities you. And maybe you should pity yourself. Alone, abandoned, forgotten. But when Mark turned sharply and hissed, Anna, not now! Emma caught the flicker of truth. This was not about love. This was about manipulation. Later that night, in the shadows of a bar, Lucas slapped Mark's back again, smirking. You're playing the right game, my friend. If she still has anything left, money, family, sympathy, grab it. Don't let her slip away. A smart man always knows how to circle back to the nest. And Anna, though bitter, whispered under her breath to Mark as they walked home. You'd better get something out of her. Otherwise, you'll drag me down with your failures. Emma, however, stood firm. When Mark visited again the next day, she didn't raise her voice or cry. She looked him in the eyes with calm strength. Mark, you chose to throw me away. You don't get to walk back into my life as if nothing happened. My door is not open for betrayal twice. His face darkened, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. He clenched his fist but forced a smile, masking his anger. You'll regret this, Emma. No one turns me away. Emma closed the door gently, her heart heavy but steady. For the first time, she was not begging him to stay. She was the one who ended the conversation. Emma thought his games ended at her doorstep, but greed has a way of exposing itself. And soon the mask of wealth around Mark and Anna would begin to crumble. The necklace sparkled like fire under the sunlight as Anna paraded through the market, her chin high, her laughter loud. She waved her hand so everyone could see the diamond bracelet on her wrist. Mark knows how to take care of me, she boasted, tossing her hair. Not like some women who end up with nothing but ashes. Lydia, her closest friend, walked beside her, fanning her with flattery. You've risen, Anna. Look at you now. Jewelry, dresses, respect. Stick with Mark, and you'll never know poverty again. But whispers trailed behind them. Old customers and neighbors shook their heads. All that money? Where does it come from? Didn't Mark abandon his wife in shame? He walks like a king, but his pockets look thin. Anna ignored the whispers, basking in the illusion of wealth. But when she returned home, reality struck. Bills piled on the table. Creditors had called twice that morning. Mark sat slumped in a chair, sweat on his brow, staring at empty accounts. Mark, Anna snapped, throwing her bag on the floor. We can't keep living like this. Where's the money? You promised me comfort. Mark's voice cracked with anger. Do you think fortune falls from the sky? I'm doing everything I can. I just need time. Lucas barged in without knocking, his grin careless. My friend, you're losing control. The facade is slipping. Everyone's starting to whisper that you're drowning. You'd better fix it, or soon no one will respect you. Mark rubbed his temples, rage boiling under his skin. It's Emma's fault, he muttered bitterly. If she hadn't failed, I wouldn't be here. She owes me. She still owes me. Anna crossed her arms. Stop blaming her. You wanted me, not her. If you can't provide, maybe I need to look elsewhere. The words cut through him like a blade, but he forced a laugh, masking his fear. You wouldn't dare. Lydia, sensing the tension, smirked. Anna, don't waste your beauty on empty pockets. A woman like you deserves real wealth, not promises that crumble. Anna's eyes darkened, and though she said nothing, the seed of betrayal was planted. Meanwhile, in the streets, old customers who once admired Emma whispered about Mark. He walks proud, but he's hollow. At least Emma, even in failure, worked with honesty. He only rides on illusions. The community that once mocked Emma now began to shift their gaze, not in pity, but in quiet recognition of the difference between resilience and arrogance. That evening, Mark stormed into his apartment, slamming the door. Anna sat by the window, her necklace glinting in the dim light, her eyes cold. She no longer looked like a partner. She looked like a woman waiting for her chance to escape. And Mark, though still defiant, felt the first crack in the empire he thought he had built. Emma didn't know it yet, but while greed was eating Mark alive, Anna was already preparing the sharpest betrayal of all. The slap of a credit card against the waiter's tray rang through the restaurant. Mark reached into his pocket with shaking hands, but his wallet was empty. The waiter frowned. "Sir, your card has been declined." Gasps rippled through the crowded dining hall. Heads turned, whispers spread. Mark's face flushed with shame. He slammed the useless card on the table, stammering, "Run it again!" But Anna was already standing, her red dress shimmering under the chandeliers. With a sly smile, she slipped another man's black card into the waiter's hand. The man, a wealthy investor she had been secretly meeting, leaned back in his chair, his arms sliding around Anna's waist as though she already belonged to him. The whispers grew louder. "Isn't that Mark's mistress? With another man?" So the rumors were true. Mark's jaw dropped. "Anna, what are you doing?" Anna's eyes turned cold, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I'm doing what you failed to do, Mark. Choosing security. You thought I'd wait forever while you drown in debt? I need a man who can provide, not one who hides behind excuses." The room fell silent as the investor rose, placing a heavy hand on Mark's shoulder. "She's with me now. You should take your pride and leave before you embarrass yourself further." Mark's fist shook, rage boiling in his chest. "Anna, after everything I gave you," she laughed cruelly. "Everything? You gave me lies, empty pockets, false promises. You thought you were better than Emma, but at least she worked. You? You're nothing without women to carry you." Her words hit like hammers. The same lips that once whispered loyalty now tore him apart in front of strangers. Lucas, Mark's so-called friend, who had encouraged his arrogance for months, stepped back from the table muttering, "I don't mix with losers." He left without a glance, abandoning him as quickly as he once cheered him. Mark stood frozen, humiliated, stripped of dignity. He could hear the whispers stabbing his pride. Abandoned by the mistress, just like he abandoned his wife. Anna leaned closer, her perfume filling his lungs like poison. "You threw Emma away thinking you were winning. But now, Mark, you've lost everything. And this time, no one will take you back." With that, she walked out arm in arm with her new man, leaving Mark alone at the table. Eyes burning, pride shattered, pockets empty. The waiter placed the declined card back in front of him, and the entire hall erupted in quiet laughter. Mark sank into his chair, hands gripping his hair, realizing for the first time what betrayal tasted like. Emma had no idea that while Mark sank into ruin, her true circle of loyalty was about to shine brighter than ever, starting with the smallest act of honesty from an unexpected hand. The purse hit the dusty ground, spilling coins and papers across the busy street. Emma gasped, bending quickly to gather them. But before her trembling hands could reach, a small figure darted in. A barefoot child vendor, no older than 10, carrying a tray of roasted groundnuts on his head, knelt down and carefully picked up each coin. His little fingers placed everything back into the purse before offering it to her with a shy smile. "Ma, you dropped this," he said softly. Emma blinked, stunned by the honesty. Many would have snatched the money and run, but this child, who clearly had so little, returned every coin. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Thank you, son. You don't know how much this means." The boy nodded humbly and slipped back into the crowd, his small frame disappearing, but leaving Emma's heart stirred. That act of innocence felt like a seed of hope, proof that not everyone was cruel. Later that day, James arrived at her door carrying a bag of supplies. He had been helping quietly without fanfare, but now he placed the bag in front of her with a determined look. "Emma, it's time you started again. You can't stay in these ashes forever. Let me help you rebuild." Emma hesitated. "James, I don't want to be a burden. You've done enough." But James shook his head, his voice steady. "You're not a burden. You're family. And when family stands together, nothing is impossible." Miriam, faithful as ever, stepped in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "He's right, child. You can start small. Even ashes can be used to grow something new. Let us carry this with you." Emma looked at the two of them, her cousin and her caregiver, and felt her heart swell. Mark had abandoned her, Anna had betrayed her, her aunt had scorned her, but here stood people who refused to leave. Their loyalty was not loud, but it was real. That night, as she laid her head down, Emma reflected on the day. The small boy's honesty, James's quiet strength, Miriam's steady comfort. These were treasures money could never buy. She whispered into the silence, "I may have been broken, but I am not alone." Yet outside, neighbors still whispered, though their tone was shifting. Some spoke in disbelief. "She still tries to rise? After all she's lost?" Others murmured with cautious respect, "Maybe she has more strength than we thought." Emma didn't know it, but her steps were already planting the roots of a new beginning. And the very next morning, she would take the boldest step since her world had fallen apart. Emma thought loyalty was enough, but soon resilience itself would take shape, and her ashes would begin to glow with life again. The hammer struck wood, echoing through the small rented space Emma had chosen. Dust rose in the air as workers nailed shelves together. The room was hot, crowded, and far from perfect, but to Emma it felt like life itself was returning. She stood in the doorway, watching the transformation with tears glistening in her eyes. "Are you sure about this, Emma?" James asked, carrying in a heavy box of fabric. Sweat glistened on his forehead, but his voice carried quiet strength. Emma nodded firmly. "Yes, it doesn't have to be big, it just has to begin." Her first employees were not professionals. They were women who had been mocked as worthless. A widowed mother, a crippled vendor, a young girl once abandoned in the streets. Emma welcomed them with open arms. "You are not broken," she told them on the first day. "Here your hands will create beauty. Here you will stand tall." The women cried, some clutching her hands, others simply bowing their heads in gratitude. For Emma, it was more than business. It was dignity being reborn. Old customers, hearing whispers that Emma was trying again, drifted back one by one. At first they came hesitantly, unsure if her strength could last. But when they saw her designs, carefully crafted from scraps and salvaged cloth, their hearts softened. "This is the same Emma," one customer said with a smile, "but stronger." Another added, "Her clothes carry something new. Hope." Pastor John visited the small shop one afternoon, his gentle eyes shining. He stood before the workers and customers, raising his hands. "What rises from ashes is not just fabric or business," he said softly, "but light. Emma, you are showing us that brokenness can still bless the world." Emma bowed her head, her heart swelling with quiet pride. She no longer sought applause, she sought purpose. And slowly the gossip of the neighborhood began to change. The whispers that once mocked her now carried wonder. "She is rising," they murmured, "even after all she lost. She stands again." But late that night, as Emma closed the shop, she paused by the half-burnt signboard she had saved from the ruins of her old boutique. She leaned it against the wall, her hand brushing its scorched edges. It was a symbol of all she had endured, and all she was becoming. In the distance, a shadow lingered, someone watching quietly as she locked the door. Emma did not see it, but the eyes that glared at her held no joy, only envy and greed. Emma believed resilience was enough, but her generosity, the very heart of her uncle's wish, was about to change her path forever. The hall exploded with camera flashes as Emma stepped onto the grand stage of the city hall. The crowd surged forward, chanting her name. Mothers she had fed held their children high, vendors raised their baskets, and donors clapped until their palms burned. Naomi, the journalist, stood at the podium, her voice echoing with power. Once mocked, once abandoned, once humiliated in court, Emma has risen. From ashes, she built a new dawn for us all. She is not just a survivor, she is a leader. The applause shook the hall. Emma stood in a simple black dress, her posture calm yet unshakable. She lifted her hand, and the hall grew quiet. "I was betrayed," she began, her voice steady. "But betrayal did not end me. I was broken, but brokenness became my teacher." Today I stand not because of wealth, but because of grace. Grace to rise, grace to forgive, grace to give. The crowd roared, their cheers rising like thunder. Tears streamed down cheeks. Suddenly a figure stumbled forward from the crowd. Gasps filled the hall. It was Mark. His once proud suit was torn, his face hollow with shame, his eyes red from sleepless nights. He collapsed to his knees before her. "Emma," he sobbed, his voice breaking. "Please forgive me. I was a fool. Anna betrayed me. My friends abandoned me, and I have nothing left. I was blind. Blind to your worth. Take me back." The hall went silent, every ear straining for her reply. Emma's chest tightened, memories rushing back. The fire, the court, the insults, the loneliness. She bent slightly, her face gentle but firm. "Mark, I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to let bitterness poison me. But you cannot return. My life is no longer yours to destroy." Mark clutched at her dress, begging, "Emma, please." She stepped back, her voice calm but final. "You chose pride over love, betrayal over loyalty. Now, you must live with what you chose." The hall erupted in cheers, louder than before. Beneficiaries wept openly, neighbors clapped, and even Naomi wiped her eyes as she scribbled her final headline. "Forgiveness with dignity, the woman who chose grace over revenge." At the foundation's entrance, workers unveiled the charred signboard Emma had saved from her burnt boutique. Its blackened edges glistened under the lights, a symbol of pain reborn into purpose. Emma touched it gently, then turned to the crowd. "This is our new beginning." The cheers rose again, thunder shaking the roof, echoing into the streets. Emma stood tall, not as the broken woman Mark once spat on, but as a beacon no shadow could ever silence again. Emma thought the triumph ended on stage, but the truest victory was still ahead. The quiet legacy of generosity that would outlive even her own story. The morning sun lit up the community hall like gold. Trucks lined the street outside, filled with bags of rice, boxes of fabric, and crates of food. Crowds pressed forward, not to whisper or mock as they once had, but to receive with gratitude. Emma stood at the doorway, her hands steady as she welcomed each family. Mothers clutched her hands with tears in their eyes. Fathers bowed in respect. Children hugged her legs with innocent joy. One young widow cried openly as Emma placed a basket in her arms. "I thought no one remembered us," she whispered, "but you came." Emma smiled gently. "You are not forgotten. None of you are." Inside, workers, many of them the same marginalized women Emma had hired, sorted supplies with laughter and dignity. What had once been broken lives were now the heartbeat of her foundation. Miriam moved among them, her steady hands guiding and comforting. James carried heavy crates, his quiet loyalty as present as the air itself. And in the corner, Naomi scribbled furiously into her notebook, her eyes shining. She had written scandals before, but this story was different. It was not about shame. It was about light. "The woman who forgave," Naomi whispered to herself, "and the woman who gave back." Donors, stirred by Emma's humility, began to pledge support. Men and women of wealth stood in line, not to be praised, but to join her mission. The foundation was no longer just Emma's dream. It was becoming a movement. As the hall emptied, Emma sat on a wooden bench, her eyes scanning the faces around her. She remembered the fire, the courtroom, the betrayal. She remembered the nights she cried herself to sleep, thinking she was alone. Now in place of silence, there was laughter. In place of shame, there was honor. In place of betrayal, there was loyalty. James sat beside her, watching the children play outside. "You did it, Emma," he said softly. "You turned pain into something beautiful." Emma shook her head gently. "Not me alone. My uncle believed in me. You stood by me. Miriam carried me. Strangers reminded me of honesty. All I did was choose to rise." She looked toward the signboard of her old boutique, now hanging proudly at the foundation's entrance. The charred wood glistened in the sunlight, a symbol of ashes turned into life. Emma whispered, almost to herself, "This is not revenge. This is rebirth." As the wind brushed her face, children's laughter echoing in the distance, Emma knew her journey was far from over. But this chapter, the one born in betrayal, had closed in victory. She stood, her voice steady, her heart full. This is not the end. This is only the beginning. What began as a story of betrayal had become a story of legacy. A reminder that true power lies not in revenge, but in the courage to rebuild and give.